I'd like Mr. Murphy to correct me if I'm misinterpreting it, that the parcel C does not have a deeded right to use that 10-foot wide way. Is that correct?
As far as I'm aware, it does not have that.
Okay, so if it does not have a deeded right to use the way, I'm struggling to get to the point that they have a right to use the way. And for the board to make a finding that they have public access via the right of way, I'm not seeing how that's connected based on the testimony and evidence presented by the applicant.
Should that have been modified?
Well, I think they have access to a public street via frontage on Swinburne.
Yes, but the last sentence is number 8.
But that's correct. I think I haven't heard testimony, and again, I leave the finding for the commission to make. Mr. Murphy just testified that that property does not have a deeded right to use that 10-foot wide way. So then it begs the question of, well, how are they gaining the right to use it? And if the conclusion then would be they currently don't have a right to use it, but they may have matters pending with neighbors and things, I think, outside of the purview of this board, then the access to the public street is via Swinburne, and that's where the driveway should be located. And I'd like to get Mr. Murphy's comment, because I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting what you're saying.
Well, you correctly quoted what I said. However, I think leaving the choice is a good thing for this commission to do. You may not find it as a fact. You could say may have access off the 10-foot wide right of way. You could use the word may.
I was going to suggest that. Could we say has potential for an access?
No, just say may have access, and it's right of way. Excuse me, its parking facility may be on the right of way or on Swinburne, depending on what is practical. Words to that effect.
Mr. Murphy, do you feel that there may be some precedent, some legal right, because of the 94 feet of access on the way, that gives the right of owners or occupants of Lot C?
Definitely. I definitely think they have a case to make for the right to use that way. However, church community doesn't necessarily want to engage in a fight to vindicate that right. So since they also have frontage on Swinburne, what they would like is if we can work something out with the neighbors that results in a peaceable use of the way by all 4 parties, fine. If not, we'll use the Swinburne front.
What I would suggest, I don't necessarily want to make recommendations to the applicant, but I think it's clear that the current public access is via Swinburne Street, and therefore that's what the commission must rule on. Now, the commission doesn't need to prohibit access via the right-of-way. If at some point in the future the applicant has rights to use that, I don't see why that would need to be a prohibition in the decision, but I think you need to rule on what exists today. And the evidence that exists today is that the public access, which is a requirement for this application, is via Swinburne Street. And at some future date, if they decide to place a driveway at the southeast corner of the property and have rights to access the public way, then they can address it at that time. But you need to rule on what they can do today, not what they may be able to do in the future, and whether they're going to pursue their rights or how they pursue their rights, or whether it's just an informal agreement between the parties. It's all a bit speculative to be making a finding.
I don't have a problem with what the solicitors just stated.
Does that mean they would be able to do that without having to come back to us to have this access on the, off the right, of the way, if they could work it out with the neighbors? Or does that mean that they would have to put in the driveway on Swinburne and then come back to us at a later time, or come back to us to not put it in on Swinburne?
Sure, I would, again, I don't want to be recommending to the applicant how they prosecute their application, but the public way is via Swinburne today. And they have obviously the right to use Swinburne Street, they're using it today. So logically to me, that would be where the driveway, okay, or the proposed driveway for this parcel C should be proposed. I don't think there needs to be anything in the decision that would prohibit them from utilizing the public hub to utilize the 10-foot driveway. If at some point in the future they have rights to do that, I mean, and they could follow the normal channels, regulatory channels that they have at the time, the same as if they were doing any other improvements to the property a year from now, 5 years from now, or whatever the situation may be.
Well, if at some future date, to answer Nancy's question, I think, Wyatt will agree with me, if at some future date, in a peaceable fashion, the church community housing begins using access of the 10-foot wide right-of-way, and it isn't opposed by the neighbors, that is not something that we come back before any town official. That's simply a matter of landscaping. And that doesn't have to come back before you. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
I agree with that. I guess what I'm wondering is, are you saying that to start with, they will have to put the driveway between now and the time they actually put the driveway in, there is some future time. If they work it out with the neighbors between now and then, would they have to, because of the proposal or what we approved, would they have to put the driveway on Swinburne and then change it? Or could they just, do they have the option? I just don't want to, I don't want to lock
the requirement of the, what they're required to show you under this application is they have access to a public way for off-street parking. Okay? So they need to illustrate that on the plan in the proposal. So whether that's their proposal, post this discussion, I would assume it is, okay, that's what they're going to do, although it's not my position to be amending the applicant's plan. I'm the solicitor for the town, Mr. Murphy can handle it. But again, they stated quite clearly they don't, that they may have rights to utilize that 10-foot driveway, although those rights are not solidified, if you will, at this time, but they do not have deeded rights. They may have other types of rights, but they're not deeded rights to use it today via a deed. Okay, I would make it akin to somebody that says, well, you know, we have adverse possession rights over this area or our land, and we want to use it to build our house. And the commission, they say, well, that's great, but we need to go to the line with the survey, as the surveyor marks it, not what rights you may have in the future if you go to Superior Court and you exercise those rights. And that's the kind of difference I think we're talking about. So I would suggest that the applicant, we need to show you that they have public access, that's where the off-street parking is going to go, and then that's the proposal that you would make a finding on.
So the proposal should say that, and we would then approve that, but that wouldn't require them to use that if they found a better way, if they found a different way. Is that correct?
That's correct. They require at this time, at the time of the application, to have public access for off-street parking.
And that would be public access, because they don't have public access for sure.
Well, they do, but the point is they need to illustrate where that off-street parking is going to go on the property. They can't show it in a spot from which they cannot get to from the public way.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Just for purposes of going forward, we're amending the application to show our access on Swinburne, directly on Swinburne.
Mr. Murphy, question.
As testified to by Mike Darbo.
Question for Mr. Murphy. Your application at this time grants some concessions to the people using